Hello, everyone. I am Bree Hillier, and I am here tonight with Stuart Chismore. And Stu is running for Lincoln County Commissioner. And we are doing an interview and just trying to get to know our candidates a little bit better. And he was gracious enough to come down and answer a bunch of questions from me and questions that I've kind of plucked from places that I have seen over time. So I really appreciate you being here. It's very nice to have you.
Thanks for having me, Bree. I appreciate
Yes.
you putting this on for me.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's jump into the questions. My first question really is, could you introduce yourself and give us your connection to Lincoln County?
Well, I was born and raised here in Lincoln County. Grew up out south of town, out by Happy's Inn. First attended school out there at a little one-room schoolhouse, right there by Happy's. Ended up moving into town later on in life and graduated high school here in Libby, and started working in the woods with my dad when I was still in junior high school, and pretty much spent most of my career working with him, or after a time bought out the family business and ran it until I retired. So I've been here pretty much continuously my whole life. I did take a couple sabbaticals different places, but
You got to do it.
my driver's license, from the day I got my driver's license, it always listed Libby, Montana as my home, and I've always had a Montana driver's license. So I haven't been gone too long ever.
That's awesome. So what was your family business? What was that?
My dad and mom started a logging company, and I worked in the timber industry. Started out packing a chainsaw and worked alongside my dad, my big brother, and then did slashing, thinning, logging, did trail work, worked all over Lincoln County and on the Kootenai National Forest through the years. After a time, we started building road and then maintaining roads, so we did quite a lot of that. And towards the end of my career with Chismore Logging, we were basically only doing road work. The logging had pretty much shut down because we had always bought federal timber sales, and the timber sales were just really difficult to get anymore. So we had to make a change in our direction to keep afloat and to keep our employees employed and ourselves going.
Right.
So that was my main drive. I did, as I finished up my career, I did end up, my last work was in the oil fields in North Dakota doing reclamation work on well sites and pipelines.
Oh, that's,
So
I did not know that.
a little bit of a change, but it was still, running equipment and moving dirt and such. And
That is super awesome. Well, to get to the main question, one of the big questions, what made you decide to run for commissioner?
well, I've always been involved in the community. Since a very early age, I've enjoyed joining clubs, being a part. I was a JC for years. I helped with Logger Days and other events that the JCs did. I campaigned for different candidates. So I've just always had a real public interest, or interest in the public service. My dad ran for state senate in the 90s, and I ran the business for him. So when we bought the business, it would have been an opportunity in a way for me to maybe run for office, but owning the business then, I wasn't afforded the opportunity, I guess is the right way to say it. So once I sold out the company and retired, I felt it was time, and expressing an interest in politics most of my life, those around me said, you need to do this. And so, what the heck, it might give me an opportunity to still be involved and maybe really effectuate some changes that I feel that we need here in the county.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, because I feel like there's always room for change. There's always room for growth, Well, so speaking of that, if you were to be elected, what would your top 2 priorities be?
The very number one priority I feel we face here in Lincoln County is our forest health and the wildland urban interface. And again, with my lifelong association with the timber industry, working in the woods, working on Forest Service contracts, and I mean, I've fought fire, I've built roads, I've done it all out there in the woods, and I know what healthy forests look like. We log millions of feet off the Kootenai National Forest in our day, and so we need to get back to bringing forest health back into our environment. We could lose vast acreage of land along with our entire communities could get burned up in this if we do not address the forest health issues we've got right now. I mean, it might sound a little bit Stuart Little, the sky is falling, but it's not. We're at a crossroads in our county right now and on the Kootenai National Forest where we need to treat our forests, and so that would be absolutely my number one priority. The other things kind of all there's budgeting is always an issue. Where are we going to generate revenue, because we're always going to have expenses. The county is always going to be fighting for revenue to do the things that they need to do. But part of that goes back to this forest health. If we could get active in the forest again by logging or thinning or whatever, we would be creating jobs, which would be good jobs that would pay. We used to get federal dollars came to the county through timber sales receipts. Now, if that could ever happen again, I don't know. But it's a possibility. We could look at that, or other avenues through our timber and logging and forest health work that would generate natural resources. The mine, my goodness, if we could get the mine going, that would be such a wonderful thing for this community, because we can't keep putting it on the individuals. We're already taxing the individuals to a point where there isn't a lot more room to do. Our infrastructure, and more county infrastructure, would be our roads. These catastrophic events we just had that came through, the flooding, the wind events, we have roads that have been wiped out. We have roads that are blocked out because of the wind throws. So those are things that I would like to see us more able to move quickly in response to some of these than we seem to be able to do. And I don't know the reason for that completely, but again, as somebody who maintained over 80 miles of paved road when we had our business going, and we had literally hundreds of miles of logging roads that we maintained, I do understand the process of taking care of roads. I would like to really bring that to the table, and I could work well with the county road crews to, by no means to supervise them, but to work with
Right.
them and find out what their needs are and help them to meet their needs, and be able to serve the county better than. And again, not saying that anything directly negative about what's going on, but it's just something we could address, and I think do a better job at than we have.
I completely agree. I really feel like, I mean, there's just been all these weird storms and, the weird winter that we had. And just, I mean, I went to Kalispell the other day and I couldn't believe the amount of trees that were just down on both sides of the
Oh.
road. And I was just like, wow.
And that would be so nice to be able to see us aggressively go after the salvage of that,
Yeah.
and some of it is the ownerships vary all over the place. I know there's federal land that's got hit hard. I'm sure there's I know there's state land, maybe not along the Highway 2 corridor, but state land that's got hammered, private land, and it would be really nice to see us. We used to call, back in my day, it was Dave, myself, they called them green slip sales, and you could find an area where there was salvage or whatever, and you could make a proposal to the land ownership, either the state or the feds, and say, we saw this area that is got hammered by the winds. It looks like there's 10 loads of logs up there. Could we work out an agreement? You state how much you willing to pay the agency for it, and they say, yeah, go for it. And we were way more nimble back in the day than we appear to be now, and so I'd like to see that, to where we could respond quicker.
Huh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So let's just say theoretically, if that was a possibility that we could move forward with, another thing that I've seen a lot of lately is all the wood not being able to be taken at the dump and stuff like that. What could we do as a community with that asset?
Well, it's tough because there isn't a lot of economic value in a lot of the blowdown that's as far as for like I know they have a wood bank over here at the port and but yellow pine generally speaking is not firewood and some of the other stuff. So we're kind of limited and we don't have a mill or any type of processing facility here like we used to. So you could bring in, maybe there was talk once about putting a fiber plant in, which would, when I say a fiber plant, that would be a plant that would grind up wood and either utilize it for maybe Presto logs or ship it off for paper or a lot of different things that could come out of it once it's turned into fiber.
Right.
But we don't have any facilities anymore, so it makes it difficult to do a whole lot with it. And again, out at the dump, I understand that there's been an issue with the initial cleanup because it was a major event. The way I understand it is, we're looking for FEMA or the government to identify, yes, you have an issue and to release funding. And so a lot of that debris and materials is just stacked out there waiting for them to come in and identify it and say, okay, there's $100,000 worth of product here as a valuation to say this is how much you've suffered. And so until they identify that, then and the feds say, okay, we're going to help you now because we can see that they're holding on to it. So there isn't room, and that's where one of the issues with this latest windstorm. Now they don't have room out at the dump to take more debris in because they're having to
Right. They're still
stockpile
holding on
and
to the first.
waiting. And that's one of the things that I don't know that I could effectuate it, but I would sure be trying very diligently to talk to the feds and say, you need to get here and resolve this because we have one issue stacked on top of another, and we can't get resolution until you get here and tell us,
Right.
okay, yes or no, you're gonna give us some money to help us with this or not. But to be left in limbo is just not working.
Yeah. It's been a few months, I think, now at this point.
So we had a very strange winter,
We really did.
with between the winds and the water, it's been very unique even for my
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah. It was the whole flooding situation was something, seeing how the community reacted to that. I mean, it was definitely kind of scary. I mean, it really was because I've never been through anything like that. But the amount of people, I mean, people filling sandbags and like all of the things, and like people, prepaying for groceries for people who hadn't had food in their fridge because they haven't had electricity for 7 days. I have never seen this community come together the way they did when that happened. And it just really inspired, it just inspired me as a whole. And I really am grateful that we have our community and ourselves while we wait to try to figure out what we can do.
That's the one thing I love about this community and all of Lincoln County. We are good neighbors and good caring people who will give the shirt off our back to those in need, and that's been going on for as long as I've been here. I've seen it kind of off topic, but an example of that I want to share with you is I sit on the Sally Sauer Heart Fund board of directors. I'm the president of the board. The Sally Sauer Heart Fund was formed probably close to 40 years ago, where Sally Sauer had to have a heart transplant. And the community got together, and the logging community in particular, and the mill, and the company land ownership, and basically we went out for 2 days and logged. Every logger, everybody who could pack a chain on knew what, and went out and logged. And all the receipts from that timber we cut and went into that fund. And that's how that fund was formed at the very beginning.
Really?
And that fund is still 40 years later. We're still managing that fund, and it's available out there to others in the community. And again, it all started by a bunch of loggers and the mill and the company
This,
workers all getting together and saying, okay. And like I say, it was one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of in my life. We went out, and it was outside of Troy, and there was an area identified, and it was company ground, and they said, okay, if you'll donate your time to log it, we will donate the proceeds of what we would have got to mill it and so back to. And so, and like I say, there were probably over 40 sawyers out sawing logs, and
that is,
felling trees and
I
stuff.
did not know
Yeah,
that.
it was, again, it just speaks so highly of our community and the people here, and the way we've always been. So, yeah.
Wow. And how long ago did you say that was?
Oh, it's right at, I would guess, close to 40 years ago. I should know because it was my dad and some others that formed the Sally Sauer Heart Fund nonprofit back then. But it was the community that did the work to finance it, you know.
That is so cool. I did not know that. That is absolutely wonderful. And I totally believe it. I mean, like I said, the way everybody just comes together, it's really fascinating and very beautiful, honestly. Okay, so moving on to another question. I wanted to talk about like the housing situation in Lincoln County. The prices of houses have gone up significantly, rent has gone up significantly, and there are people that have had to leave because they couldn't afford to pay the insane rent and, the housing costs and stuff like that. And I would just like to ask realistically, I mean, not in a fairy tale, but realistically, in your opinion, what can the county do to help try to alleviate those kinds of issues?
The biggest thing is good paying jobs so people can afford. You know, I guess it's twofold. That I think is the primary key is that we encourage growth over here at the port to where, I think Nomad that's over there now is a real asset to the community. I think it's
Oh,
good jobs being
absolutely.
provided over there, and quite a few of them. So we need to encourage that, but then we do need to look at it as from a tax point of view through the county and the state is we can't base our property taxes on what the flathead is willing to pay for a home.
Right.
I just read the other day the median home price in Whitefish, Montana is over $1 million now. The median. That just absolutely,
That's
the
crazy.
Kalispell's a half a million, but those all impact over here, and
Right.
it's limited. There's only so many homes, there's only so many buyers. They're going to drive up the prices if they keep getting driven out of the flathead, and then
Right.
they'll come over here, and then prices go up and prices go up. And so we have to address that. I don't know how much the county can affect those costs versus the state and property taxes and stuff, but we have to be looking at it. The biggest shame in the world is to tax somebody out of a home they've lived in their whole life
Yeah.
because it's being based on what that house would sell for versus what it
Right.
was bought for.
Right.
And that's, again, a lot of that goes into the state level where that's looked at, but we need to be looking at it, and then we need to be better stewards of the money that we do receive and make sure that we're making it so that we don't have to continually raise taxes on people, because if the cost of homes keep going up, cost of everything else is going up, and then we're taxing more. I look around town, I cannot believe the amount of apartments that are in this town now compared to what there
Oh,
were
yeah,
20 years ago, 10 years ago. They're popping up all over the place, and that's a whole different housing market than what we're used to here.
absolutely.
And I don't know, I honestly don't know how affordable they are. I've not fortunately had to look at price of one for myself, but
Yeah.
I've heard that it's prohibitive for a young person.
I mean, they're all beautiful, they're very nice, and, but I mean, it's like you said, the cost of everything. I mean, I realize it cost a lot more to build it than it did however many years, even just 6 years ago, so I totally understand. And I think that kind of leads me into my next question, which is about development. Do you support development in Lincoln County? And if you do, how would you plan on trying to keep our small town charm along with the ability to develop and grow as a community, not necessarily housing?
Well, growth is inevitable. There, whether you and to say I don't support it, I wouldn't be accurate, but that I do wouldn't either. I mean, it's inevitable. So we need to be very cognizant of development as it happens, that it's done properly. I live out south of town, out by Happy's Inn, and I'm with the fire department on the board of trustees out there with the fire department, and we've got a lot of development going on out there. So the one thing we have to watch for is that as it's developed, that water resources are met so we can fight fire if we need to, that the roads are properly built, and things along that line. As you come closer into town, the infrastructure needs or impacts are different, because you start to get into where you have the water system that the city has, and the sewer and the streets and stuff. So all of that has to be addressed as it's happening. At times in the past, we've allowed kind of, there hasn't been a consistency in development here in the county, and for whatever reason, but we need to have that. When I was with the city council, we talked of impact fees. So, and however you want to phrase it, impact fee, or there's other phraseology for it, but as people come in here and become reliant on existing services, they need to pony up a little bit, because we've all been building this, whether it be
Right,
the water treatment plant up on the hill, all the city residents, all the people on city water put money into.
right,
So now if somebody comes in and builds a hotel,
right.
they need a plan investment fee is another word for, and so we need to be doing things like that and watching out for things. But yeah, again, growth is inevitable.
Right.
And we do live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, so we need to try and protect that, but we can't protect it by shutting it down. One of the difficult things we face here is land ownership that's so largely federal. We can't maybe treat the forest like we would if it was private or even state, but on the same sense, that federal ownership prevents a lot of growth,
Right.
because nobody's going to build a home on federal ground.
Right.
So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a catch-22 scenario. And that
That's
that is
interesting.
one advantage of all this federal ground, is we know we're going to be limited to the growth that we can see, because
Right.
the feds are the largest landowners in the county.
That's so crazy. That's interesting that you said it like that, because I never really thought about, because I hear both sides of that. Some people hate it and some people love it because
Yeah.
nobody's going to come in and take over.
Well, you look just here in this valley, you can almost see the land ownership lines. If sitting here in the valley, you just look in each direction and you can see where the federal land ownerships
Right. Where it
are,
stops.
because that's where all development stops.
Right.
You know, going back to the, do I support, we need to be, again, putting forth planning that will best manage the growth. And again, I said I was with the board of trustees out at Happy's and stuff. And emergency services are a big part of growth.
Right.
As we grow, we need a more detailed fire department, ambulance service, and such. And those are things that, again, need to be addressed in the growth. How do you fund as these come on? And we've been fairly successful in addressing that out around Happy's. But we can't just step back and say, okay, it's all going to flow, because as this growth comes on and there's more need, we have to figure out a way to fund. And man, that's a bigger issue than funding almost for us, is having personnel to serve as
Yeah.
on the fire department and on our ambulance service out there.
Yeah.
We're a small department, and the volunteers that do serve, God bless them, they do a wonderful job, but it's limited how much they can do, and as we grow, so that's going to be probably one of the real key issues the county as a whole faces. And I'm not saying as a commissioner you can directly address it, but you need to be cognizant of and figure out ways. The state has passed some legislation where volunteers, ambulance and fire departments, are going to get tax breaks.
Oh.
They get their time on duty or put against, because again, we're volunteers, so there's no monetary that you can say, okay, you're in this much work, and so this is going to be, but you get so much for each hour you put in as a tax credit
I
down the
like
road. So
that.
it's a very good idea. It's a wonderful idea. And anything we can do for our volunteers and our
Absolutely.
emergency service people is a bonus, and hopefully that way we can start to maybe entice some new membership.
Yeah.
So
No, I had
yeah,
not heard
yeah,
that.
it just passed, and I think it actually will go into. This is the first year that your taxes will be affected by it. So next year you would actually see
Huh.
an adjustment if you were a volunteer fireman or ambulance.
That is really awesome. I
Okay.
really like that. Okay, so I am wondering about if you are to become a commissioner, how will you keep decisions that you make and the county commissioners make transparent and accessible for the community?
It should be common practice to be transparent. And we're mandated by the state with our meetings. Again, I'm with the department out there. We can't have a meeting where we don't advertise it, where it's not open to the public, and where we don't keep good minutes. By state code, we're required to do that. So anytime a county entity is meeting, making decisions, it needs to be open to the public. And whether the public participates in that is up to the public, but the public has to be afforded the opportunity to know what's happening and to be able to participate. And when I say participate, that might mean only to be able there to sit in on a meeting or stuff. But again, as a county entity, any county entity is required by state law to have open meeting laws and keep good records of what you've done. And I know that there's been some real concern about how some of that's been in the past, and I would adhere to the law,
Yeah.
and Montana codes and what it says about that. You shouldn't do anything that, at all that you're not able to do in the light of day.
Right.
if you can't take the scrutiny of
Right.
daylight on it, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Absolutely.
We need to, put that out on the agenda, that it's a decision we're looking at making, and give the community and the public the ability to see what's going on.
Right. I mean, because I just watching the city council and the county commissioner meetings gives me anxiety. There's so like you have to motion to leave and to start, and I mean that's a lot to remember. And when you're just people who just want to do the right thing, sometimes the things like that, I
Yeah.
mean, probably go right out the window.
I think it's easy to forget, what we're mandated or required to do, and how we're to hold our meetings and stuff. But that's no excuse for allowing it to happen. If it happens, then again, and like I say, with our board out there, we've had it happen. We've thought, okay, we can, and then hindsight was, wait a second, and then we have to go back and readdress it,
Right.
because that is what we're required to do. So I think it becomes a habit, though, and to where it isn't that difficult if you just you do it, and
Right.
you stick to it, and you don't make exceptions to those rules, and you go out, and and after time, it's not so burdensome
Right.
as one might think. At times you think, man, I can't believe we can't do anything about this because we got
Yeah.
open meeting laws and all of this. But if you just get in that habit, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And it sure alleviates a lot of heartburn to the community when you are open.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. Um, so on that note, discussing open meeting and minutes and stuff like that, if you were to be elected, what is one thing that you would do to make sure people feel like they're being heard and seen, and that the transparency is getting across to the people? I mean, I know sometimes no matter what you say, people aren't going to be happy, but one thing that you think you can do that would help alleviate that heartburn.
I think it's just the action. You take the action, you make sure that all of the business you do is done in the light of day, so that people realize that they're not wondering. One of the hardest things I see around in this community, and this has gone on for years, is the rumor mill that, well, such and such happened, or this and that happened. Well, again, if you operate in the total light of day, then people can say, well, no, it didn't happen. I was there. I know it didn't happen. It becomes just the process of doing it,
Right.
doing it the right way, so that people don't question it. And yeah, I mean, invariably somebody will miss out and think, well, I understand you did this. And you say, no, it was, it was totally public. It was totally open. We got the minutes for it. We can show, nothing nefarious was done or was attempted to be done. But you have to put it into action, and keep it there.
Yeah, I think that is so important. I really think that that is a big thing that needs to happen with every branch of the government and all of that.
Anytime you're dealing with public trust or public money, you need to be open about it. We've had non-governmental organizations that have done things in the past here in the county that you question, because again, it's in the public interest that they're formed and doing this, and then all of a sudden, again, they're meeting behind a closed door. That just doesn't work. You can do that in business,
Right.
but you can't do it in the public sector. You just can't,
Right.
because every single individual in this county is a shareholder in the operation of this county.
Right. And that's something that I think people that fail to understand is how important we are as the individuals. I feel like that gets minimized sometimes, and it's like we're not the top priority, and there's other things that seem to be more important. And You know, I mean, and I mean everywhere, not just locally.
Well, as an elected official, you can't go there. Again, you keep saying, if I'm elected. I'm going to say, when I'm elected, I'm not going to be beholden to any individual or any organization except for the voters of Lincoln County. That's who I answer to 100%. And it's the way we're intended to govern, and that's the way I will govern.
Awesome. I like to hear that. I think that's absolutely fabulous. Where can people learn more about you or how can they contact you?
Well, I'm working on that now. I do have a Facebook page, but I am learning how to get that set up. And actually, tonight I'm going to do a little more work on it. But it is Stuart Chismore for County Commissioner, District 1 County Commissioner, and you can find me there. I'm on Facebook, opining a lot more than I probably should, but you can find me there and think, well, this guy's a little bit or not. But and then obviously where you're going to put this out on your
Yes, on Facebook,
Facebook.
absolutely, in the
So,
group.
and I again, I'm trying to get a better presence. I'm going to be campaigning and out in the public eye. I hope a lot between now and June. That's the first hill, and after that, then it'll be a little different throughout the summer. But again, basically, on Facebook is where you most likely I do. My email address is chrismorelogging@aol.com. You're welcome to drop in on me that way. So
Okay.
I'm trying to get into the 21st century on this tech stuff, but
Yes.
it's a slow road for an old man like me.
Yeah, no, don't feel bad about it because it's a weird world. The internet is a weird world.
Well, I'm very pleased with this opportunity, and I would like to say to those who hear this or watch this, I would appreciate your consideration and your vote. And those who have already decided to vote for me, I would ask you to tell your friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Put out a good word for me, and I believe I can serve the people of Lincoln County honorably and well. And I thank you for the time to speak tonight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you again. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.